Hello, I'm Coral Johnston, life coach, and yesterday we talked about what anxiety was and where it comes from, and today we're going to talk about managing anxiety and how it can be a force for growth in your life. We said yesterday that anxiety is a major source of energy and it comes from fear, and that we tend to want to either run from it or run to it, depending on the circumstances. Run to or from the things that are making us scared and nervous. To manage anxiety takes some study. Some people had the good fortune of being raised in a home where they were intuitively taught to manage anxiety. They probably weren't taught in the way I'm going to teach you, but when you're a child and when your parents sit you on their lap and tell you nice things about yourself, and it's a very engaging conversation and you feel secure, that sets up a situation where in close contact you feel safe. Sometimes circumstances in your life don't feel that safe, and so they start to bring about anxiety. But when we're parented, if a parent says, now settle down, act your age, or things like that, those kinds of comments are often accompanied by a hug, a holding, a safe gesture, a caring gesture from your parent, or series of gestures. That means that anxiety that came with being disciplined was coupled with comfort. And so your anxiety about being disciplined was minimal. Now, on the other hand, if you were disciplined with spanking, harsh words, or more harsh kinds of things, then you might have missed some of those soothing things that ease anxiety. So this isn't a diatribe on bad parenting or anything like that. Anxiety is such a common occurrence that it's hard to escape it, no matter how wonderful your family life was. So what I'm trying to set the stage for is that the things I tell you are not the things your parents would have told you to calm you down. These are specific to managing anxiety in adolescent and adult life that are techniques, not things you would have learned at home ordinarily. The things you learned at home that made you have anxiety coping skills resulted in the things I'm going to tell you. So, since anxiety can be pretty threatening, especially if it's accompanied by a sense of dread or a lot of fast heartbeat, sweating, shaking, quivering, all those things that make you feel really uncomfortable and out of control, sometimes even crying, those things you want to be able to have a real sense of control about. So suppose that you're out shopping, or you're with a group of people somewhere, you're at work, you're not alone, you're not in a safe space, you're just out in everyday life. And suppose you start feeling anxious and it really bothers you. One of the first things that you can do is just do something really simple, like, start at 20 and count backwards to 1. Or try to add up some simple numbers, 2,193 and 132. Try and add those numbers up in your head. Those little exercises distract you from your anxiety. They don't cure it. They just change your mind for a moment. And if you practice doing those things, especially if you can practice them alone when you're feeling anxious, and feel the way that it changes gears inside of you, you start to realize that you have some ability to change this anxiety. You have some ability to reduce it. Some people recite a poem, recite the Gettysburg Address, recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Anything that you can do that is easy to remember, uncomplicated, but engages your brain in everyday reciting activity. It's hard to pay attention to two things at once. So if you can even read a menu out loud to yourself. Those kinds of things take you out of your anxiety. So say you're at a lunch with someone where you're having some anxious moments. You can just start reading the menu out loud a little bit, and it takes you out of that physical sensation of anxiety. You've probably seen people wear a rubber band around their wrist that they'll flip. That's another kind of thing. There's many purposes for that, but what that does is engages you physically. So there's lots of quick techniques for taking you out of an anxious state of mind in the here and now, quickly. Those aren't cures, they're quick fixes, and they're always handy to have, to know, and to do, okay? Just because they're quick fixes does not diminish their importance. They're really useful. But to really get more to the heart of calming anxiety, there are some things that we can do to retrain your body about how you respond to anxiety. So first of all, we want to talk just a little bit about what you're anxious about. You need to maybe write down some things, situations in which you find yourself being anxious. Maybe talk it over with somebody you really trust. Something to help you define what are the situations that make you anxious. And then when you figure those out, say like if it's a situation at work, or if it's an issue with your mate, or something going on with your children, your parents, somebody close to you, or friend, or being in public spaces, there's just an endless list of things that can make you anxious. See if you can come up with 5 or 6 and get a gist, at least that, and get a gist of what is it that's making me have anxiety. And see if it is the actual situation, or if it's something that the situation is reminding you of something more painful and uncomfortable than the actual situation. So if you're fortunate, the actual situation it's all that's making you anxious. You don't want to have a conflict with your boss. You're afraid you'll lose your job. Normal, everyday anxiety. But we can still help with that. But suppose it's something where you're being reminded of something in the past. Suppose that you had been molested when you were a child. And so when a person, say you're a woman, and a man starts to make advances, just friendly little advances that they're romantically interested, they're not insulting you in any way. But just the mere fact that someone comes close to you, that maybe you haven't gotten permission or you're not sure if you like them, that can make some people very anxious. And they almost feel a sense of being out of control to where they don't know what to do, how to stop it, how to get themselves in a comfortable situation. Okay, so that's a situation where your memories are making a present situation, raising your anxiety out of proportion to the situation. So in those kinds of things where your anxiety does not match the situation, those are the ones especially you'll want to learn these techniques for, because they really help you handle those situations so much better. But all the way around, no matter what kind of anxiety situation you find yourself in, learning the things I'm going to talk about will make handling anxiety easier. 2 things that, if we're fortunate, we learn it unconsciously in childhood. If we're not, we have to learn it in adulthood. It sounds, it sounds very very technical to do, but it's really effective. And those 2 techniques are learning to ground yourself and learning to center yourself. Now remember how I said if you were fortunate as a child and you were, something like being held on a lap, bounced on a knee, and maybe talked about something that I can remember my grandfather, putting me on crossing his leg, putting me on my knee and rocking me up and down. I'm like 3 or 4 years old. And he would say something like, now, don't pick up that cigarette butt, or something very common that would happen in a home, especially back when I was young. where people smoked a lot more. So, you know, if he had smacked my hand and told me not to touch the ashtray, I would be more anxious. But he was playing with me, bouncing me on his knee, and it was all friendly and safe. And then he suggested some behavior improvement. No anxiety. Never touched a cigarette butt after that. That's an example of everything going together congruently, and I don't have to go and learn to center and ground myself over that kind of situation. But there might have been other situations for me or anybody else that would have been more threatening, and I carry that memory, and it makes everyday behavior sometimes anxiety-provoking. So, grounding is the idea and the experience of learning to understand that the earth you stand on, the floor you stand on, the chair you sit on, all have to do with your sense of security in the world. And it seems so basic that it's like, what in the heck is she talking about? If you have a lot of anxiety, you don't know what I'm talking about. You can learn it, but this is outside of your awareness. This is why some people are anxious and some people are not. People who are not anxious intuitively are grounded. Grounded means, like I will say to people in my office, if they're talking about anxiety or something that makes them scared, I'll say, okay, I want you to stop a minute and feel the chair underneath you. Feel the chair in back of you. Feel the arms on the chair or your arms on your knees. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel everything under you that's holding you up. Feel it. Physically feel it. Like right now I'm feeling the stool underneath me that I'm sitting on talking to you. I'm looking at the furniture around me. I can touch the island in front of me, hard. That's a hard, cool surface. Being able to touch that is a sense of what's real in my environment. And whenever people are anxious, they have lost touch with what's real in their environment. And so getting people to understand that their immediate physical environment is really important. So if you understand that the earth is your most basic stabilizing force, you can't get away from it. You don't want to get away from it. It is where we all live. But the more you have experienced anxiety, the more you lose touch with that. And you can almost see it in people because it's like their feet don't touch the ground as much. They don't feel at home walking around in the world. They feel like they're going to kind of fly off the handle. Those things, all those kinds of sayings come from some real basic things about how we operate in the world. So when a person is learning to manage anxiety, one of the things they can do by themselves is sit cross-legged on the floor, your back up against the wall, and feel the ground underneath you. You know, this is a basic meditation position, but it can also be a really good prayer position. It can also just be a very good way to learn to ground yourself, to feel everything underneath you and in back of you, holding you up, supporting you. Because when you're anxious, you don't feel supported. You feel like you're all alone and you don't know what to do next. So we're teaching our body that that's not true. That first and foremost, you have a place in this world, and it can be anywhere you want it to be. You can sit where you want, you can stand where you want, you can lean where you want, and those are part of your environment that supports you. Now, I told you that would sound kind of strange because you don't remember being told those kind of things as a child usually, because they were taught automatically by the way people physically treat you. And so if you've got a lot of shaking around, it's easy to feel less secure. But if you've got a lot of this, sit this way on somebody's lap, watch TV, it's very calm, it's very safe. That is basic grounding. Because especially little children, they don't ground to the ground as much as they ground to the grown-up. The grown-up that's holding them, nurturing them, caring for them, putting them in a chair for dinner, picking them up and doing this and that, and putting them in bed. All those things that are done with little children. All those things done in a calm manner ground a child. If there's some things missing, you've got to make up for it now. You've got to train yourself some things that you didn't really experience when you needed them. It's not the end of the world, but it's done in a way now as an adult that feels very different than it would have felt as a child, because you are having to train yourself. So that's grounding, learning to feel the ground beneath you, learning to be able to call on that. Whenever you start to get anxious, it's very simple to say to yourself, I feel the ground underneath my feet. I feel the counter behind me. I feel the chair beneath me. I feel my car seat underneath me. All those things that your body is physically supported. And I feel the inside of my tennis shoes. All those kinds of things. It's very hard to feel anxious when you're feeling something physical. Being grounded physically is part of what reduces anxiety, because it's got you in touch with the real world. Remember I said that soldiers are trained how to manage fear and anxiety in combat? Well, they're trained to know what to do when people start shooting at them. They either know to stand behind something, lay down, find their hand grenade, look for their helmet. There's like an endless list of things that they know to do, but they have to do with making them literally safer. So if you're learning to feel what's supporting you in your everyday world, you're learning to feel safer. And feeling safe is what reduces anxiety. And you can make yourself feel much more safe in the world. Another way that helps grounding is to imagine, let's take this into centering first. The second thing that helps with this whole idea of reducing anxiety is called centering. And this, again, sort of comes from out of the Eastern tradition of meditating and yoga, to where a person becomes more familiar with their own body, their own insides. And I don't mean like picturing your intestines or anything like that. I just mean the act of going inside sort of spiritually, emotionally, and getting connected there. When you're anxious, you do not feel centered. You feel wobbly. You feel shaky. You feel the earth move under your feet in a way you don't want to feel. So learning and again, it's easiest to start this when you're sitting, especially if you're sitting on the floor in a cross-legged position, but actually you can learn it standing, sitting, laying down, whatever. Every person has a part in their body, a place in their body where they feel centered. And it doesn't always feel the same. Oftentimes it might be here, what we think of as our heart, right up here in the chest. It might be in our stomach or in our lower abdomen. It might be up here. It might even be somewhere in our head. They're going to change by circumstance, but eventually you'll kind of get to a part of you to feel comfortable with that feels like your center. And that's where you want to be able to retreat to. Not in a lock yourself in your room, not talk to anybody for an hour, but just a sense that there is some place within yourself that's your safe place. A lot of people don't feel that. And it's very teachable. You can take these concepts that I give you and you can teach yourself this and feel much more comfortable in a reasonably short period of time. And the great thing about it is it's portable. It's within you, so you can take it wherever you need to. So one of the things that helps this is you can do a little visual guided imagery for yourself. So you maybe have felt someplace as a child that felt really safe. Maybe you had a little playhouse, maybe sitting on a parent's lap, maybe you had a dog, hugging the dog. Oddly, in my background, is I just remember an old blue chair in my grandparents' yard that whenever I would think of that, I would just feel so peaceful. So clearly I love being at Grandma and Grandpa's house, because just that recollection of that backyard and sitting in that old wooden chair under the apple tree is a really soothing memory for me. So if I were going to try to re-ground myself, learn grounding, I would take that image and then really work on finding what feels centered for me. How do I feel centered? And I would associate that with that memory of my grandparents' backyard. Some people can sit in their favorite recliner, sit or lie or whatever, and think of being wrapped in a beautiful comforter, and feel warm and secure and safe. You want to remember that. You want to say, I remember that. That is a good feeling. I remember that. You want to touch that part of yourself that you think of as your center. You're literally teaching your body to associate your center of gravity, so to speak, with a good memory. Okay? So say that you're one of those people that loves the beach. That's most of us think the beach is just really delightful. And you can think of being on the beach, like laying in a chair, laying in a lawn chair with your feet in the water, the sun on your body, the warm wind, the waves caressing you. You create this new memory from old memories. You're creating a good memory to associate and anchor in your mind, in your body. You bring it in and you say to yourself, I like how this feels. And so that's another way you can, you carry that little anchor with you and you kind of retreat to that spot in an anxious situation. Say you've got to go into a meeting at work in which you have to say some things to a group of people and you really are nervous about that. Well, taking a few minutes in your office after you've sorted the whole thing you're going to say out in your mind, then take a couple minutes to remember that lovely time sitting on the beach feeling all warm and safe, maybe with family members that you felt really safe with, whatever. And really remember that. Concentrating on a memory like that is called anchoring. We can anchor ourselves to bad memories. It's better to anchor ourselves to good memories. And part of anchoring has to do with doing this, kind of hugging yourself, holding yourself where you feel centered, and that all kind of wraps that memory stuff of a good memory into your mind and body all at once. It's a very physical way of teaching yourself to feel safe. And that's really all we're trying to do with anxiety, is rebuilding your sense of safety. Because the more you can feel safe, the more you will feel free to use your anxiety as an energy source, not as a paralyzing fear thing, but recognizing that if you need to assert yourself, you need some anxiety energy. But you also want to have that sense of that you're standing firm, right? These phrases, standing firm, where are you standing? You're standing on the ground, but you have to remember to learn to feel the ground under you. And you're not going to think of that in the anxiety-producing situations as much, but if you practice it, you will have trained yourself. Just like we train soldiers to know what to do when they're scared and they've got to take positive action for themselves and everybody else. So you have to do that same thing, but you're not in actual combat. You're in everyday life that provokes anxiety, in situations that provokes anxiety. So you want to have some tools on what to do when you feel anxious. So when you develop these positive anchors, that you're going to spend some time remembering things that are positive for you. You can think of it as counting your blessings. I mean, everything that good positive psychology teaches you is in this whole process of teaching you to use the positive thoughts and memories and bodily associations that you can to move yourself forward, to not have to be stuck with a sense of anxiety when you really need to be calming yourself down and getting said or done what you want to do. Anxiety attacks, panic attacks are part of this whole thing that we're talking about. We go from like test anxiety to anxiety during conflict to, anxiety, we're doing something that it feels a little bit against our wishes, to a full-blown panic or anxiety attack. They're all kind of the same, they're just a matter of degree. The more you practice centering and grounding and creating those positive anchors, the more ammunition you have when you do have an anxiety attack. Some people can only manage an anxiety attack by never thinking of what that thing is that makes them anxious. Well, that does work, but sometimes life doesn't cooperate. It will remind you, whether you want to be reminded or not. So it's better to practice anxiety management so that when anxiety wells up, you have some strategy. Now, there's lots more we could say on this topic, but the whole idea is that if you learn to calm yourself and have some association with safety, then you're more free to think of further things you want to do. You know, there's many things we can talk about being able to assert yourself or manage your boundaries or hold things within your boundaries. All those things have to do with reducing anxiety. But it's hard to reduce anxiety if first and foremost you haven't learned to ground yourself and center yourself. Because if you didn't get that in growing up, or if it got way later, or whatever, you can teach it to yourself. It just looks different than how you received it growing up. It might sound, you know, kind of wonky and technique-like, but it's so scientifically proven. It's pitiful that it's not taught in every grade school, because it would make life a lot easier for everybody if everybody knew how to do this. So that's one of the reasons that I put this out there for you, is to be able to make use of it and use it as one little tool, one little building block down here on the foundation to move forward. So thank you for being with me on this discussion. Have a good evening.